What if the most disturbing thing about the house that Jack built isn't what you see on screen, but what happened while it was being made? In a world obsessed with cinematic shock value, psychological horror, and films that dare to cross the line, few directors have built a reputation as volatile and as calculated as Lars von Trier. Known for pushing audiences into discomfort and forcing them to confront the darkest corners of human nature, von Trier doesn't just make movies, he constructs experiences. And with the house that Jack built, he may have gone further than ever before. On the surface, the film presents itself as a chilling narrative, a serial killer recounting his crimes as if they were works of art, dissecting violence with cold precision. But beneath that premise lies something far more unsettling. This isn't just a story about a killer. It's a deep dive into obsession, control, and the thin line between creation and destruction. And for a channel like Shadow Reel, where we explore hidden meanings, disturbing filmmaking processes, and the psychology behind controversial cinema, this film sits right at the edge of what storytelling can become. But here's where things begin to shift. Because the real story doesn't start with the character of Jack, it starts with the environment that brought him to life. The tension wasn't confined to the script. The discomfort wasn't limited to the audience. During filming, there was a growing sense that something about the process itself mirrored the darkness of the narrative. The kind of atmosphere where method acting blurs into something more intense, where direction becomes psychological pressure, and where the pursuit of authenticity begins to demand a cost. And that's what makes this film so different from other disturbing movies. This wasn't just about creating fear, it was about sustaining it, holding it in place, letting it breathe between takes. Actors weren't simply performing scenes. They were navigating emotional territory that felt uncomfortably real. The kind of filmmaking where silence lingers longer than it should, where a look carries more weight than dialogue, and where the camera doesn't just capture, it observes, almost clinically. For viewers who seek out dark cinema, controversial films, and behind-the-scenes truths, this is where curiosity turns into something deeper. Because when a director like von Trier sets out to explore violence as art, the question isn't just why. It's how far is he willing to go to make you feel it? And maybe more importantly, how far were the people around him pushed in the process? Because as the production moved forward, subtle details began to emerge. Details that suggest the line between fiction and reality wasn't as clear as it seemed. Moments where the performances felt too raw, too precise, too genuine to be just acting. Moments that raise an uncomfortable possibility that what you're watching might not be entirely constructed. And once you start seeing it that way, you can't unsee it. Because what happened behind the scenes of the house that Jack built doesn't just add context to the film. It changes how you experience every single frame. And to understand that, we need to step inside the set itself. And before we step deeper into that world, before we start uncovering what really happened behind those cameras, there's something I want to ask you. If you're drawn to stories like this, if you're the kind of person who doesn't just watch films, but feels them, who notices the details most people ignore, who questions what's real and what's constructed in psychological horror and disturbing cinema, then this channel was made for you. So if this kind of content resonates with you, take a second to like this video, not just as a gesture, but as a signal. It tells me you want more deep dives into controversial films, hidden meanings, and the darker side of filmmaking. It helps this video reach other people who are just as curious and just as willing to look a little deeper. And I'm genuinely curious about you. Have you ever watched a film that made you feel uncomfortable in a way you couldn't explain? Not just scared, but unsettled, like something stayed with you after it ended? If you have, comment below. I read those stories, and they often shape what comes next here on Shadow Reel. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the moment. Because what we're about to explore isn't just another behind-the-scenes breakdown. It's a journey into the psychology of filmmaking, into the choices that blur the line between art and manipulation, and into the kind of cinema that doesn't ask for your attention, it demands it. Because once you see what really happened during the making of the house that Jack built, you won't watch it the same way again. And now, let's step inside that set. The moment you step onto the set of the house that Jack built, something feels off. Not in an obvious way, not in the kind of exaggerated tension you'd expect from a disturbing film production, but in something quieter, more controlled. Like every element has been carefully designed to keep you slightly unbalanced. And that's where the first illusion breaks. Because this wasn't chaos. It was precision. Lars von Trier didn't run his set like a traditional filmmaker chasing performances. He orchestrated it like a psychological experiment. Every scene, every pause, every uncomfortable silence carried intention. In the world of dark cinema and controversial filmmaking, directors often push boundaries. But here the boundary wasn't just the script, it was the emotional state of everyone involved. And you can feel that, even if you don't know why. There's a certain kind of filmmaking that doesn't just aim for realism. It tries to extract something real. And that's where things start to blur. Because when you're dealing with a story that dissects violence, obsession, and the artistic justification of brutality, the process itself begins to mirror the narrative. The camera isn't just recording anymore, it's observing. Almost like it's waiting for something genuine to slip through. And this is where the atmosphere becomes crucial. Reports from productions like this often describe tension, but here it wasn't explosive, it was sustained. A low, constant pressure. The kind that doesn't break you immediately, but slowly shifts how you respond, how you perform, how you exist in that space. For actors working within psychological horror and extreme storytelling, that kind of environment can pull performances to another level. But it also raises a question that lingers beneath everything. At what cost? Because when authenticity becomes the goal, comfort is usually the first thing to disappear. You start to notice it in the way scenes unfold, how interactions feel slightly too real, how reactions don't seem entirely rehearsed. And that's not accidental. In this kind of behind-the-scenes reality, direction becomes less about telling someone what to do and more about placing them in a space where the reaction happens on its own. It's subtle, controlled, but deeply effective. And maybe that's what makes it so unsettling. Because when you're watching a film like this, you're not just engaging with a story, you're engaging with a process. A process that may have asked more from its actors than what's visible on screen. A process where the line between performance and experience isn't clearly defined. And once that idea settles in, it changes how you interpret everything that follows. If this already makes you see the film differently, you can drop a quiet, "I see it now," in the comments. Just those words, nothing more, because what we're about to uncover next takes that feeling and pushes it even further into territory that most productions would never dare to explore. And this is where things stop being just controlled and start becoming personal. Because once the foundation of that atmosphere was set, the weight didn't stay in the room. It settled into the people. And at the center of it all was Matt Dillon, carrying a character that wasn't meant to be understood in a comfortable way. Jack isn't chaotic, he isn't loud. He's calculated, methodical, disturbingly calm. And to bring that kind of presence to life in a piece of psychological horror like the house that Jack built, you don't just act, you adapt. Dillon has spoken about approaching the role with precision, almost like dissecting a mindset rather than performing emotions. And that's where the shift happens. Because in most films, actors are guided to express something. Here, the process leaned more towards suppressing it, holding back, staying still, letting silence carry meaning. And when you place an actor in that kind of restrained, clinical space for long periods of time, something begins to change, not dramatically, not all at once, but gradually, in ways that are hard to measure. This is where method acting and psychological immersion start to overlap with something more intense. Because the scenes weren't built around spectacle, They were built around discomfort, the kind that lingers between takes, the kind that doesn't fully switch off when the camera stops rolling. And in a production focused on disturbing cinema and emotional realism, that lingering becomes part of the performance itself. It feeds it, quietly. There's a reason why certain moments in the film feel almost too precise, too controlled to be purely scripted. It's not about improvisation, it's about environment. When an actor is placed inside a sustained emotional tone, their reactions begin to align with it naturally. And that's powerful, but it's also unpredictable. And then there are the scenes that push even further. Moments where the psychological tension isn't just implied, it's embodied. Where the emotional distance required to just perform starts to feel thinner. Where the question shifts from how do I play this to how do I stay unaffected by this? And that's not a technical challenge anymore. That's something else entirely. Because when you're dealing with themes like violence, control, and the artistic framing of brutality, repetition has an effect. Doing a scene once is one thing. Doing it again and again and again, holding the same emotional tone, the same detachment, can start to reshape how that emotion is processed. Not permanently, maybe, but enough to leave a trace. And this is where the line begins to blur in a way that audiences rarely consider. Because when you watch a film like this, you assume there's a clear boundary, a safe distance between the actor and the character, between the set and reality. But what if that distance wasn't as stable as it seems? What if some of those reactions weren't entirely constructed, but influenced by the very environment designed to produce them? If that idea is starting to settle in your mind, just write "too real" in the comments. Because what happened after the film left that controlled environment and faced a real audience took everything we've talked about and amplified it in a way no one could ignore. And then, the film left the safety of the set. All that controlled tension, all that psychological precision, everything that had been carefully contained during production was suddenly exposed to something unpredictable, a real audience. And not just any audience. The premiere at the Festival de Cannes, a place where controversial cinema isn't just expected, it's tested. At first, everything followed the ritual. Lights dimmed, silence settled. The kind of anticipation that surrounds films already labeled as disturbing, divisive, boundary-pushing. People were ready to witness something intense, but they weren't ready for this. Because what unfolded on that screen didn't feel like conventional storytelling. It felt invasive. The psychological horror wasn't built on jump scares or tension arcs. It was slow, deliberate, almost confrontational. Scene by scene, the film demanded something from its audience: attention, discomfort, reflection. And for some, that demand became too heavy. Then it started, not all at once, but enough to be noticed. Movement in the dark, seats shifting, people standing up, walking out. And once that threshold is crossed in a space like Cannes, it creates a ripple effect. Because now it's not just about the film anymore. It's about the reaction to it. The shared realization that what you're watching is pushing further than expected. Reports describe dozens of people leaving during the screening, some in silence, others visibly disturbed. And yet, at the same time, there were those who stayed, completely still, engaged, watching with a kind of focus that suggests something deeper was happening beneath the surface. And that's where the division became impossible to ignore. On one side, the film was labeled excessive, indulgent, unnecessarily graphic, a piece of controversial filmmaking that crossed the line for the sake of crossing it. On the other, it was defended as a bold exploration of violence as art, a psychological descent that forces the viewer to confront their own thresholds. Two completely different interpretations, born from the exact same experience. But here's the part that lingers. Because when you connect this reaction back to everything we've explored, the controlled environment on set, the emotional immersion of the actors, the deliberate pacing, the clinical observation, you start to see a pattern. The film wasn't just designed to be watched. It was designed to provoke a reaction, not a universal one, but a personal one, almost like a mirror, because the question shifts. It's no longer, what is this film trying to show me? It becomes, why am I reacting this way to it? And that's where Lars von Trier has always operated, right on that edge where cinema stops being passive and starts becoming confrontational. So when people walked out of the house that Jack built, were they rejecting the film or reacting to something it revealed in themselves? If you felt that tension while listening to this, you can leave a simple, "I stayed," in the comments, because that alone says more than a long explanation ever could. And now that you've seen what happened behind the scenes and what happened when the world finally saw it, the film itself becomes something else entirely.